Now, assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties, but I'm back on. Akhi Muhammad. Yeah, you gotta push the icon, Sheikh, so we can like you did last time. I don't know how you did it last time on your phone, but you gotta push the so the green camera can come up. I think it's something down on you, so it should be like a green face or something. Oh, there you go. Nah, it's not. Did it? Oh, okay. It looks like it's about to start now. I see your icon at the top. I'm trying to figure out what that means. Did it? The camera start yet, Malik? Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get the video. There's something. You gotta push the icon again. Yeah, push the icon. That way, it should be like I should see a green camera thing. Like on your phone, it should be like at the bottom when you go on to look at the emojis. There should be like a green little face, something in like a camera shape or something right there. Push that. Yeah, a white button with a green camera. Shukran, Adam. Abdul Ghani. That way you can come right up. Supposed to be a white button with a green camera on it. He said bottom right camera next to the like button. You see it yet, Malik? He said hit the camera by the person's pic. I don't even see his I gotta hit the camera. Hold on. Yeah, I see it say Dawa. I called him, but I don't see any picture where I don't see his picture and where it say camera next to it. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, I see his pic. It says Malik Muhammad, but he don't have no camera, no icon with say camera on it. Oh, I see it now. I see it. All right, I see it. Okay. All right. Shukran, Shaheed. Yeah, I see it, but I'm pushing it. Hey, Malik, there's nothing happening? Because your name, your picture has the green camera on it. It says La Ujit. Yeah, but it says I don't. I don't know, man. It's supposed to it should say I'm hitting it, and it should say invite, but it's not even doing that. I'm hitting the camera and everything. It don't even let me Now I see your picture up top. It's not even doing like the last two times it was not an issue. And I'm trying to figure out why there's nothing going on. It says nothing. Now you gotta accept. You gotta accept my call. I sent you an invitation. You gotta accept the invitation.
That's what it is. You have to accept it.
I sent you the invitation. No, the connection is on work. Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, I sent you the invite. When you see here you got a green camera on here, and I hit Idolpha. So yeah, there you go. It's on there now.
Yeah, I had to log out.
Alhamdulillah.
I logged out.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so alhamdulillah, good to see you, Sheikh. You know what I mean?
How you been?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, man. Just been working, man. Sometimes I've been under the weather a lot, man, because the weather down here is weird in the south, man.
Yeah.
So it's 80 degrees today, but just last week it was 40. So and it's February and it's 80 degrees. I'm used to freezing in Philly, you know?
I wish it was 80 degrees down here where I am. I'm built.
Yeah, it's 80 degrees right now.
I'm built.
Alhamdulillah.
I'm built for 80 degrees.
Ah, man, shoot, man. Hey, I was just like I said, I mentioned to the brothers. I said we want to discuss is that, and I think you brought this up before. The issue of socially and culturally, the issues of African Americans in America, and then us being Salafi Sunni Muslims on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it seems that we separate the two things. That we separate the reality that's on the ground from us being Salafi, as if that doesn't have an effect on our career as Muslims.
Right.
So I think that today I want to try to get you to explain and bring out some issues into why does it have an effect on us, and to believe that it doesn't is actually destructive way of thinking, destructive behavior. So you can begin there, then we can go from there.
Well, the majority of and I'm speaking in specific terms here, of the Salafis in America, I would assert are African Americans. The majority of the Salafis. So we're talking Philly, we're talking Detroit, we're talking some of the other major cities, which are predominantly African American cities to begin with. And from just my travels and the people that I know on Facebook and the places that I've been, it seems to me that the majority of the people who claim Salafia are African Americans. So what happens is the issues that affect or pertain to African Americans don't magically go away at the point that you take Shahada and become Muslim, or at the point that you become Salafi. All of the ills and the pathologies that affect African Americans and low income people, period, doesn't just magically go away because you claim Salafia. There are some real educational, economic, health, housing, basic infrastructure issues that have to be or should be addressed. When those issues are addressed, let me take it back. The issues that you have coming into Salafia or coming into Islam, you bring with you.
Yeah,
Those same issues affect the new community that you are now a part of, which is the Muslim community. So
exactly.
if you're undereducated, you're bringing undereducation and adding it to the Muslim community. If you have
No,
issues with drugs and alcohol, you're bringing that into the Muslim community. If you come from or have a history of unstable families, no father, abuse, whatever the case may be, you bring all of that into the Muslim community, and now right.
exactly.
So now that becomes a part of the Muslim community. When we look at Salafia, Salafia, alhamdulillah, we know it's the haq. We know it. But there are other areas that need to be addressed that Salafia in itself cannot necessarily fix. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Right. So Salafia in America and the black community cannot be separated. So we have to understand the deficiencies in Salafia. We must look back at the deficiencies in the black community and figure out what do we need to do in order to fix these issues.
So let me say this. Firstly, for y'all people, nobody's trying to say that the brother saying Islam is not the answer because they might try to say that. No,
Right.
what he's saying is that we have you reading books in the masjid and having slogans of a name is not going to fix the problems in the black community. And it's not. This is not a reality. But I want to say this to you, brother. Can we say that those people who are in charge of our communities or the way that we're learning Salafia, is there a disconnect somewhere where as though we have this complete way of life, but we've missed the ball on implementing that way of life to fix our own social ills? Is it because we're not using Islam according to how we should use it for us, and that we're just using Islam how somebody from another country has given us, or according to another culture's application of certain fiqh rulings or whatever? I'm just trying to find the core problem because we know Islam is the truth. You understand what I'm trying to get to?
Look,
There's some disconnect somewhere.
look, if you look at it in terms of medicine, if you have whatever sickness let's say you have a headache, right? You have a headache. You don't
Yeah.
go get chemotherapy.
Mm. Mm.
Sorry about that. Uh, I don't know if you know Jamil. I call him Sugar. Your brother was just calling me from Philly. Anyway, sorry about that.
Okay.
The medicine has to be applicable to the sickness. The ills of the African American community may not be the same ills that the Pakistani or the Arab community have to deal with. So,
Yeah.
so we can't take how they apply Islam per se and apply it to us because it may not be addressing the issues that need to be addressed. You understand?
Exactly.
They may not have high rates of alcoholism. They may not have high rates of generational poverty. They may not deal with issues of being under-resourced, underfunded.
Incarceration and
Right.
stuff like that.
Schools being underfunded, children being undereducated. That may not be their issue. So really, in essence, you can't even really look to them for the solutions
Yeah, exactly.
for these issues. It is imperative for us that there has to be a fusion. between staying within the legislation of Islam and applying Islamic principles, as well as applying the knowledge of from the various sciences and various um, fields that will enhance the African American community. Like it's imperative for us that we stick to brothers like Tahir Wyatt. It's imperative
Hmm.
for us that we listen to brothers like Mufti Muhammad,
Yeah.
and we, you know,
Yeah.
and we talk to Abu Sajid and Ali Davis, and you know, all of these other Islamic academics who have expertise in that field, and that we get with them and we use what they have, as well as brothers who have knowledge of, you know, all of the other aspects of a community that make a community a vibrant community and deal with issues. We need people who specialize in counseling, marriage counseling, drug and alcohol
Mm.
counseling. We need people who have expertise in sociology, psychology, and all of the other, because trust me, these other communities, they have that. Some of these other
Yeah, they do.
communities that have strong infrastructure, they have all the stuff I'm naming. They have their own doctors, they have their own dentists, they have their own carpenters and architects and lawyers and all of these things. You know, I always go back and I always refer back to the Muslim community in Dearborn, Michigan, and in
Yeah.
Hamtramck. Those people are self-contained up there for the most part. They're pretty much self-sufficient. The people who are a part of those communities really don't have to go too far outside of their community for their everyday dealings. If they need a lawyer, they have a lawyer in their community from their own people who understands their situation. If they want to go to the dentist, they have a dentist that they can go to. My issue is infrastructure. We have to create
Hmm.
infrastructure, and lack of wealth speaks to lack of infrastructure. So we have to find ways to build wealth and then apply that to it.
Well,
Go ahead.
see, I'll give you, I mean, a real scenario, man. When I was in Egypt, right? And it didn't hit me until I got back here. I didn't meet one person there who knew what it was to have a broken home, a drug addict parent, or somebody was murdered in their family, like killed over drugs or shot up on the corner. And it speaks to the fact that that's most of our reality, right? That grow up in these neighborhoods that we grew up in. But most of us, if we told our life stories, probably sound the same. So if that's the reality, you cannot talk to somebody from that reality of violence and just total chaos and try to talk to him with this dead, archaic, institutionalized way of religion being taught to him. No, you gotta be a doctor now. Now you gotta go into this, you gotta go in there with your surgeon's knife and be able to break down how this person was raised, and you got to know how to give him enough medicine Islamically to bring him out of that. Because you can't teach me or you or one of our children who grew up in these crazy environments and had to grow up in this stuff like you would teach Ahmed in the middle of a desert. And I think that some way, somehow, we just think we can keep teaching our people like we learned when we were overseas. And this is not working. It just seems that there's just a broken disconnect, because that information, which is the truth, is just seen with all the noise in our ears from our social and cultural reality, is just blocking all of it out. I mean, blocking enough of it out to where as though we don't see a spiritual uplifting that will then in change bring about the other ways of uplifting ourselves. And without that spiritual uplifting, it just don't seem like we're getting any traction, man. I don't know. That's just my opinion. You know what I mean? I understand what I'm trying to say.
Well, along with, if you look at the Sahaba, can can you hear me? Am I still on?
Yeah, I'm listening to you. I
Okay.
hear you. Yeah, you on.
When you look at back in the day with the Sahaba, they had expertise in different areas besides just Islam that benefited the entire community. They were merchants, they were businessmen, they had skills and they had the ability to create wealth. There
Yeah.
is a gap between African Americans and whites. I just posted a link for it. Um,
Yeah.
there's a gap, and it's a growing gap between African Americans and whites as far as wealth and wealth accumulation and all of the different aspects of accumulating wealth, be it housing,
Yeah.
assets, all of these things that speak to giving an individual or a community the ability to become economically self-sufficient. There's a gap in education. Um, some numbers that I looked at a few years ago, I would have to go back and look at uh, the new numbers if there are any, but there's the majority of Americans in this country, black, white, Asian, whatever, are not educated. It's only
Yeah.
like it's less than 40% that have a bachelor's degree. It's somewhere around 30% that have uh, a bachelor's degree. It's only 11% of the population that have advanced degrees, which are master's degrees, and then 2 to 3% have professional degrees, Juris Doctorate, PhDs, medical doctor degrees, things like this. For the African American community, last time I looked, it was only 22% of us were educated, meaning having degrees. Of that 22%,
Mm.
the majority are black females.
Mm.
Black males are toward the bottom of the barrel when it comes to education. So again, when we talk about issues that pertain to why we don't have wealth, why we don't have infrastructure, um, this is one of the, for me, this is one of the primary reasons why is that we're so fractured and disenfranchised, and we're so disconnected uh, from education and disconnected from um, some of the means to acquire wealth, to get that good job, or to start a business. Look, if a person wants to become an electrician, I tell them become a certified electrician, because when it comes down to, say, bids for jobs or bids for contracts for the city or for the state,
Hmm.
something like that, well, one of the criteria is going to be, are you certified? You may be the best electrician in the world, and you've been doing it for 25 years. You learned it from your father learned it from your grandfather. But if you don't have that credential to go along with it,
Yep.
then you're cut out of an entire aspect of uh, money making. A
Mm.
lot of these white companies, they have these certifications, which allows them,
Yeah, they do.
right, and that allows them to be able to be eligible for these contracts working for the city, and they get that city money, and that city money is long money.
Yeah, and that money long as Broad Street.
You know, you know. So, you know,
You know what I mean?
the brother Tahir Wyatt, I watched one of his talks, and he was talking about, the way that we've been going about um, funding our communities is outdated. It's archaic. It's not
Yeah, I was
applicable.
there. Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
applicable to 2018.
yeah,
We can't use tactics that we used back in the day and use it now. This is a new age. And this
yeah.
this is this world, and even in the Muslim world, the time that I spent in Egypt, time that I spent in Southeast Asia, time that I spent in Europe, they are heavily credentials based. What do you have? What are you bringing to the table?
Mm.
I don't want it.
You're right.
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 So,
You're
you
right, bro.
know,
Right.
college isn't for everybody. College isn't for everybody. Just like plumbing school isn't for everybody. Electrician school
Yeah.
isn't for everybody.
But something is for somebody.
Right. So whatever your niche is, that's what you need to
Hmm.
excel in. And you need to get those certifications. And those certifications, believe it or not, they open doors. They open doors for you. Um,
I would like to.
go ahead.
It's a point you brought up that I would like to bring out when you said that most of the people with trade or with education in our communities are um, black women in our communities. And I would like to throw this out there and see how you thought about this. I think that has a direct effect on their marriage situation amongst the Salafi youth and amongst the Muslim youth. Because if women hold the degrees and they're pushed out there, they're given the welfare, they're given the Section 8, then at some point you lose reality who's really the leader of the community. And then the woman, she becomes the leader of the household, the community, and the man is kind of regulated to no going nowhere jobs. He's kind of regulated to a reality that's in the shadow. So if that's the case, I see that we're bringing that into Islam because that same dynamic exists right in our own communities where the sister had a Section 8, the sister has a degree, she has the car, she has all this stuff like that. And the man, with most of it isn't his fault, his upbringing brought him to a point in his life where he is now. And we see this dynamic right in the Muslim community. So it's like, to me, how can you believe that our reality socially doesn't have an effect on us as Muslims? Because that reality is right there.
Understand this. Nothing is by accident. Nothing is by accident. When we talk about structure of the society, you have people whose job is to structure and make sure that the agenda that they set happens. So African American women being far more educated than African American men is not by accident. It's by agenda. And that's something that we need to understand, because what happens is African American woman, by nature, women in general, according to Islam, are they look to the men to be their protectors, to be their supporters, to be their maintainers. But if you take away that man's ability to provide for his family, change the dynamic and give it to her, now, she don't need you. And you look like a weak person. You understand? Mm-hmm. So then what happens is, now the narrative is, you're weak. You don't have the ability to provide for me. I need somebody who's my equal. As she moves up the ladder based on her education and based on her tenure at a company, who is she coming in contact with? Caucasians. She's not coming in contact with other black men. She's coming in contact with others. And that's who she ends up forming families with. That's who she ends up having children with. And again, black males are relegated to this almost, it's almost persona non grata category. They're almost irrelevant. Why do I need you? Now, how does this apply to the Muslim community? That same dynamic comes over into the Muslim community, and many times the narrative or how we are perceived by the foreigners and by other people in the masjid is we are leeches. We are the group that the masjid has to take care of. We're the group that's always got our hand out because we don't have the ability to provide for ourselves. It's always us in that, their hand is up, our hand is down dynamic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've heard an African brother say one time, and he wasn't saying it that he believed it. He was saying it, explaining to me why some Africans don't respect African Americans. He said, well, they feel as though you guys been here all these centuries, you have nothing to show for it.
And he absolutely doesn't understand. He absolutely doesn't understand what's going on. No, he doesn't.
And what a brother who said this to me understood, but obviously the ones who he was talking to, that's not a statement of justice. That's not a statement of justice. If you're dealing with a people who on purpose was annihilated and the whole system has been set up to keep them ever from having any type of wealth. And I say this, and maybe you can agree with me, disagree, you can fine tune what I'm about to say. If you have people who are not Americans originally, like we're Americans originally, we were here for who knows how long, but you have people who second generation first generation or third generation who are from African countries, Arab countries, whatever Muslim country they come from, and stuff like that. When they come here, they can get loans, they can get all these different things and things like that. They can start communities and businesses. The thing is this, I say to them, they're not afraid of you to have any monetary power here because guess what? They can send you home at some point. If you ever get too powerful, they can just put you back on an airplane back to your, because you're connected to a landmass. You can go back. Now, me and you in our nation, if we ever got any power and ever got stable and ever got our communities together, they have to live with that fact because there's nowhere to send us. So, I don't think they're ready to live with that fact.
The connection to the landmass is a huge thing. And I've talked about collective efficacy when we did these talks before, and having a culture that is connected to a landmass carries a lot of weight. If you look at African Americans, look at an African American brother who follows the Jamaat Tabligh. When you look at him, what do you see? You see Pakistan. You see India.
Yeah, he looks just like a Pakistani.
You see it in how he dresses. You see it in the food that he eats. But if you see a Nigerian who happens to follow the Jamaat, he still looks like a Nigerian. Yeah. Because he has his own culture, his own landmass, his own people, so to speak, that sort of speak to how he dresses and how, he has his own.
Yeah.
African Americans, we lack that. The Muslims who follow many of the ulama from the Khalij area, when you look at them, you see them, they dress like the Saudis, the imama, and because that's who they're following. You follow the ulama from Yemen, and you see the brothers dressing like the Yemenis. We don't have that. Yep. We don't have that cultural connection to a landmass, and that is problematic with us because we're sort of blowing in the wind and just looking for a culture to sort of cling on to because we don't have our own. When I was in Singapore, one day I fell asleep in the masjid. I fell asleep on the floor, and when I woke up, it was a big Jamaat Tabligh, Asians. Yeah. None of them were dressed like Pakistani. They were all dressed like Southeast Asians because that's what they are culturally, ethnically. They're Southeast Asians. I've seen groups of black males who are with the Jamaat, and they all look like Pakistanis. Does that make sense? Yeah. They all look like Pakistanis, right? But it wasn't a Pakistani necessarily in their group. Where did they get their style of dress? Their style of dress is connected to Pakistan. Where's Pakistan? It's a landmass. You understand what I'm saying? So many times we get lost. We have identity issues. And these identity issues, hold on a second. Willina Brooks said, but we have our own culture when our brothers try to hold on to, they are made to feel they are not Muslim. Right. We have to come to terms with our Islam is not defined by Arabs or Pakistanis.
Exactly.
Our Islam. Look, Yom Al-Qiyamah, I'm standing in front of Allah. I'm not going to be judged based on Arabs or based on whatever. None of that is.
Based on my own actions.
Right. It's going to be based on me. So we have to. We have to come to terms with. They are not the barometer for correctness. When I say they, I mean anybody outside of us. We can't look at them and be like, well, they're more Muslim than we are. They're not more Muslim than we are.
Well, I think it's two things. I'm gonna bring a nice I'm gonna bring 2 points. I'm gonna bring an example of the point I'm gonna make. The thing is that we have an issue where as though we believe automatically that we've been oppressed so much and have lost so many battles that we believe that others are automatically better than us. We may not say that out in the open, but psychologically it's there in the way that we act, in the way that we deal with other tribes of people. We always have some type of inferiority complex somewhere.
We're not comfortable. We're
Um,
not comfortable in our own skin. We're not comfortable in our
exactly,
own right. So we
exactly. And
look
I'm
for
gonna give you a
validation.
nice,
We look for validation elsewhere.
exactly, exactly. So, like for example, this stove and everything like that, I wear because it's comfortable for me, not because it's my cultural dress. It's comfortable. I like it.
Right.
And the thing is that I bring the Super Bowl up, and I'm gonna bring the Super Bowl up because an issue came up. A Twitter was said by you know who, that whole coat situation. They said while the Salafis are studying and educating the people, we have the people of innovation celebrating the kuffar, right? Talking about the football game. The fact that the Eagles won, they were celebrating in Philadelphia and things like that. So the issue, they basically saying it's an innovation to celebrate the Super Bowl and to celebrate your team winning and things like that. So alhamdulillah, I talked to a brother that was in Egypt, and he was just like, well, people have urf, people have culture, and you can't deny the fact that football is part of American culture. Definitely Philadelphia's culture. Their culture is football. And Sheikh Fawzan was asked a question about the Super Bowl. He said it's permissible to watch it as long as it doesn't take you away from the worship of Allah, it doesn't waste your time. The point I'm trying to make is that there are things that is in our culture that's our culture, and we don't have to. I don't have to say, oh, I don't have to get around a certain group of people and say I don't like football or I don't like the Eagles or I didn't watch the Super Bowl because I'm around these certain group of people. That's my culture.
Man, Detroit Lions 2019. What?
That's what I'm saying. So it's like we want to play this role as if that's not from our culture. And guess what? I'm a Philadelphian. I'm a Muslim first, but I'm a Philadelphian, and the Eagles are a family heirloom in Philadelphia. And I'm not ashamed of the fact that I grew up watching the Eagles, and I'm not going to get around Arabs or Africans and act like I like soccer.
Yeah, I can't stand soccer. I can't lie.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Look,
so it's all confusing, man.
Look, Sheikh Tahir gave us, brother sent me a short clip where he coined this term, dual identity. And he talked about the dual identity between the African American and the Muslim, that we have two different identities based on two different communities that we belong to. That dual identity is just an offshoot from what W.E.B. Du Bois coined as double consciousness. And double consciousness basically speaks to how African Americans have to basically learn how to maneuver in two different worlds. When they go out of the house and out of their own community, they have to learn how to deal with white folks, and they have to learn how to deal with the society as a whole. But when they come back to their own community, they're a different person almost. How they speak, language that they use, food that they eat. How many times have you been at work and you maybe get some food from a West African restaurant, you put it in the microwave, and somebody who's not from that will come in and be like, man, that food stinks. So what do? You stop bringing the food that you like to accommodate them. You understand? So you have to learn how to maneuver within two different worlds. Now, what I would add to that is that black folks don't have, black Muslims, let me specify Muslims. We don't have a double consciousness or a dual identity. We have a triple consciousness or a triple identity that we have to juggle between being American, because we are American. This is where we're from. We know the culture. We know the language. We know the food. We are Americans, those of us that reside in America. And then you have the black identity and you have the Muslim identity. So you have actually three different identities as Muslims that we have to juggle between. When you are with African American Muslims, Ramadan, iftar is some of my favorite times. And I especially like it when I go to black folks' house, because we eating baked mac and cheese. We eating greens. We eating fried chicken. You know, I can eat rice and I can eat, some of the other, food that belongs to other cultures sometimes, but I like to come back to what I grew up on, right?
Yeah, I like soul food.
Yeah, yeah, soul food. But how do I want to word this? It's that triple consciousness that we have to deal with. We have to juggle between being American, being black, and being Muslim, which is something that no other group that I know of really has to do that. It's just us. And some doctors and some studies have spoken to that causes an undue stress. So now we're talking about it causes health issues. It causes issues with the heart. You understand what I mean? Heart attacks, stress,
Okay.
all of that kind of stuff, because it's very stressful moving between these three these three groups that you have to maneuver between. Does that make sense?
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, even like for example, the way I talk about the way that I'm Muslim in Philly is not the way I'm Muslim down here in the South.
Right. And
I mean, it's just a different.
right. Look, when you are around Muslims who are African Americans, you talk in the way that you all are familiar with. You use terminologies and phrases, and there's a level of comfort and ease that comes with that. There is nothing wrong with that, because I guarantee you the other groups, the Pakistanis, when they're around their people, they have a level of comfort. They
Yeah.
can say certain things, they can make jokes, they can that culturally and socially they all understand, they all agree with. It's funny, they understand it. Same thing with the Saudis, the Yemenis, and anybody else.
Exactly.
When
Exactly.
you go around the Saudis or around the Arabs or the Pakistanis, you now have to sort of, I don't want to say you can't be yourself, but you'll appear very, very strange.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not that
Yeah.
same level of comfort. So now you sort of have to twist and turn just to sort of fit into whatever the situation is based on whatever group you happen to be with at that time. A Saudi gonna be
You're
a
right. You're
Saudi
right.
gonna be a Saudi wherever he is. A Yemeni, he gonna
Yep.
be a Yemeni wherever he is. A Pakistani gonna be, and the thing is that it's accepted and it's understood that they are gonna be the way they are. They have a culture, it's known, it's understood, they have a landmass, but we as African Americans, we don't have that. So we sort of float between different groups and try to get in where we fit in, so to speak.
I mean, this is deep because you bring that up about the thing about our social reality. Um, and I'm gonna answer this question. This is that, but isn't that the problem? Why do we have to do that? We have to do that because as African Americans, we're very unique in what was done to us in modern times, sister. Our reality is not everybody else's reality. Because we're portrayed as aggressive. Our women are portrayed as loudmouth and aggressive. We're portrayed as criminals. We're portrayed as this, that, and the third. So we already have a complex when we go around people. We may not think that, but subconsciously you do, because that's how, when you get around other people, you pull back some of your African Americanness because you don't want to seem aggressive. I do this. I have to do the same thing here in the South, because Philadelphia and up north, Detroit, Chicago, New York, Jersey, it's a very pushy, aggressive environment. I give you an example. When I talk at my job, people literally say it sounds like you want to argue and fight. Now, they know I'm not even like that, but my accent is very aggressive. I talk when we talk from up north, we touch people and we hit each other in the arm, and we're very alive when we talk. And the South is not like that. It's not very loud, and the people are not very pushy. So I have to tone that down. I really do. I have to tone that down to a certain degree. Not saying that I'm not myself, but I have to understand where I'm at in my environment. So, so the point that I was trying to make is that, for example, like Bilal, Bilal radiallahu anhu, everybody sees us a certain way. For example, how is it possible that you make a movie about Bilal radiallahu anh, and you don't talk about none of his virtues, but you just talk about the fact that he was a slave? You know, I mean, the fact that his father was Qurayshi. Then you get the blackest person in the world to be as if he was just, you know, so even amongst the Muslims, they portray us a certain way. So it's crazy. So you look at all this stuff like that, and that's why I'm saying our reality has an effect us as Muslims. And I lived around Arabs in the Middle East. I'm telling you right now, they have a certain way of thinking about us. Plain and simple.
Look, check this out. I'm sorry to cut you off, but there is a narrative that is exported throughout the world concerning African Americans here in America. The narrative for us is exported by way of media, by way of movies, by way of television, by way of music. All of it is exported out and it's put out into the world. So when you travel as an African American, there's already a preconceived notion of how you're going to act, what you're going to do. You know, you're going to be loud. Look, when I was in Egypt, I had an Egyptian, and I really don't think he meant harm. I don't, because if I thought he meant harm, you know, we might have had a problem. But he came up to me after work one day, and he said, "Aki, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are the niggers like in America?" And I was like, "Excuse me?"
I had Egyptians do that to me too.
Yeah. So, and I was like,
he said, "What's up, nigga?"
Yeah. I'm like, "Where do you get this term?" He was like, "Well, that's what they call you, and that's what you guys call yourselves." Also had a situation when I went to Southeast Asia where I was asked, "Do you play basketball? Do you rap? Have you ever been to prison?" I'm asked these stereotypical questions about black males. I'm like, "Nah, I don't really ball like that. No, never been to prison. No, I don't rhyme. No, you know." And they're looking at me like, "Is this guy really black?" Because the narrative and the image of black males is we are one of those 3 or 4 things. We've been relegated to 3 or 4 different things. We can't be a doctor. We can't be lawyers. We can't be engineers. We can't be educators. That's like, you know, crazy to think that. So the narrative for us, who and what we are, many times is our, or I should say, our story is told through images. You know, I had this conversation with a good friend of mine, and I talked about this movie Black Panther. And I know, you know, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I feel like it's a counter narrative, even though it's fiction. It's a counter narrative. It's an image that other groups, or let me take it. It's an image for maybe a young black kid to sort of see himself in a different light, to see himself in a commanding light, to see himself in, you know, in a light that's unthuggish, ungangster, not poverty stricken, not, you know, and again, it's about the image. It's about the idea of other than what you always and normally see. You understand? So images, you know, images are hugely important. But, you know, one thing that I wanted to touch on is when we talk about community, I think we have to understand. I have some statistics right here. It says 3 in 10 U.S. Muslims, so 31% of the Muslim community in America have college or postgraduate degrees, equivalent to the share among U.S. adults as a whole. So that's 31%. Foreign-born Muslims are more likely to have at least a college degree, 38% than are Muslims who are born in the U.S. 21% perhaps reflecting immigration policies that give preference to highly educated immigrants. So the foreigners are coming over here with education. And they're told basically African Americans are X, Y, or Z. So they come here with a preconceived notion. We wonder why they mistreat us, why they look down on us, why they think we're this, why we think they're that. It's because that's what they have been fed about us, even before they get over here. And the majority of those that come over here, many of them are educated. You go to the campuses throughout these different departments, and it's the foreigners. They're from all over the world. And they have a preconceived notion of who and what we are. African Americans are on the low end of the educational attainment stratum. We're very low. And because of that, we're seen as not having money. We're seen as a liability. And we have to change that narrative ourselves. We have to change that. We're always viewed as the lower hand versus the upper hand.
So I'm gonna say this. Some of that has to be our fault, because I think sometimes when we talk about this issue of socially and culturally our reality here and how it affects us Muslims, sometimes we get in the habit of not looking at our own part to play in our own destruction. No doubt, we want to use Trump now as the scapegoat. We want to use everybody as an scapegoat and things like that, which if you want to blame the whole world, then fine, that's fine. And no doubt about it, there is a system in play. There are hands in play that has oppressed our people and totally annihilated us socially and culturally. We get that. We understand that. It's not a lie, and it's a reality. But imagine being a foreigner. You come to America. You come to the masjid in the hood. It's not fixed. We don't own it. It's chaotic. There's no power structure. I mean, just imagine walking in there and seeing a masjid being ran the same way as our homes. Because our homes are one single parent broken. And the masjids look just like our homes.
Let me tell you this. No masjid that I've ever been in a foreign land was like that. It's here that you find that dynamic. You don't find none of the masajid that I've visited in Egypt, Southeast Asia, anywhere I've ever gone, have you found that type, women fighting in the masjid, not knowing if they're going to have the money to fix something that's broken, the doors being closed because the state comes in and closes it due to health issue, whatever the case may be. These are dynamics that we find here. We are viewed as not being able to handle our own business. That makes sense.
Yep.
If you come from a Muslim land and the masjid that you've been going to your entire life, that dynamic doesn't exist, and you come here, we look like animals. They're like, these people are crazy. They're not deserving of respect. So some of that we sort of bring on ourselves. We have to have some accountability. We can't blame everything on everyone else. We have to have some accountability.
Yeah, that's the point. And it's like, that's why I'm saying that, again, socially and culturally, what we've been through and what's going to happen to our people, we cannot say it doesn't have an effect on us as Muslims, because our masjids are ran like our communities. And it's because the fact that we didn't have resources when we wasn't Muslim, we become Muslim, and we still don't have resources. So the masjid looks like a broken home.
Mm-hmm.
It's ran just like a broken home. And we can't keep blaming everybody. I mean, of course you can push us around. We don't have any strength, So we know at some point, when do we say, okay, like we have another thing that I think affects us as Muslims, the reality of the savior complex, or reality of, for some reason, we hate our own academics. We hate our own people who went and did things. We have an issue, and the reality. Look at Mufti, you look at Tahir Wyatt, who reached the level of being a scholar, and we still want to run him out of the country. We still want to slander him. We still want to talk even. And I'm not holding anybody's billboard in the air. I'm just making a point that same sickness crab in the barrel and that same hating yourself is still with us in Islam because we haven't. How you don't like, for example, we got all these businessmen. When are we going to connect our academics Islamically with our academics in the dunya and put together some type of working system, whereas though we can start doing the other thing that other tribes in this country do, where they have built whole communities, whole business. I mean, it's unbelievable that we have all the tools in front of us, but it's as if we don't know how to gather the resources together. If you know what I'm trying to say.
You have, and it's, I mean, it's amazing, but again, I understand the why.
Mm-hmm.
It is seemingly that just about every African American who is a graduate, who has completed a program, he is then ostracized when he comes back to the States. There is something about him that's not right. There is something about him that we can't take from them. As if the other du'at from other, be it Arab or UK or wherever, as if they are faultless, as if they're perfect. So
Is it self-hate?
right. So, Tahir Wyatt or Mufti or any of those guys, I don't look for them for perfection. I look for they're gonna make
Exactly.
they're gonna make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but how I had a brother in Cairo, the brother that I called you and I told you that I spoke to him a few weeks ago from Philly.
Yeah.
He's in there. Yeah, he told me a long time ago. He said, you know something? He said either brothers forgot or they never knew how to differ Islamically. And I thought that was very, very profound. I said, what do you mean? He said, because if you have a scholar who precedes you or precedes another brother in a position, and you have another scholar who has a different position, and that brother chooses that scholar over that scholar, you both have someone from al-ilm that precedes you in your position, and those positions are in opposition, what do? He said, you go drink tea together and go talk about something else. Because it's not on you. He said, you are not commanded to be correct as Muslims. You're not commanded to be correct, but you're commanded to follow. He said, even the scholar who is wrong still gets a reward for what for his ruling. So these people look for a mistake from, again, brother like Tahir Wyatt, who's more than qualified. And see, I'll say this too. For any of the brothers who have a problem with Tahir, who have a problem with Mufti, I would say that you probably couldn't carry an intelligent, articulate conversation with them for 5 minutes and talk.
Nope.
Couldn't do it.
They probably couldn't hold a conversation with somebody in the Barnes and Nobles for 5 minutes, let alone Tahir Mufti.
I mean, right. So, and I've seen groups on Facebook that just talk crazy about him. And
Yeah.
I'm like, these same dudes
Yeah.
can't read Arabic, can't read the Quran, but they always got something to say about somebody who has actually accomplished something. Look, the man has a seat in the Haram.
Yeah.
How do you get a seat in the Haram? Do you pay for it? Is your name picked out of a lottery? No, it's a process that you have to go through, and that process is guided by the scholars. So the scholars,
That's what I'm saying.
so the scholars choose to put that man where he is, and he's going to come back to Philadelphia, and people are going to run their mouth about him. But that
Yeah, but listen.
that speaks to the level of the people, though.
Yeah, so I mean, and I gotta get ready to go to work, but in closing, because I definitely want to do a part 2 to this because I like to go a little deeper, but I gotta go to work. But I want to say this, man, and you clearly see it. I mean, like for example, you have people overpraising somebody. Like for example, you got Hassan Somali, man, Lord, rewarding for the good that he's doing. But you have somebody like Hassan Somali in our city in Philadelphia who hasn't finished anything, hasn't no academic prowess, nowhere near Mufti or Tahir. But we lift him up over our heads. And he's from Britain, and he's not even from your same people, which not an issue, but I'm just making the point I'm making. But you have somebody from North Philadelphia, from the heart of the ghetto, who became a scholar, has a seat in the Haram in Medina, and scholars love him. He comes back to his people in a city that we all know. It's like, it's a couple of cities in America that's known for to be wild and crazy. Philadelphia, Detroit, Chicago, Jersey, and we can keep going. But those are like the big names. Baltimore, it's like, the big five. You got like the big 5 or 10.
Yeah.
He's from that place. Allah raised him out of that muck, brought him back to you, cleaned up, a scholar, and you try to destroy the man. But you raise this other guy over your head who doesn't have any academics, any knowledge, really not like that, and you raise him over your head. And the simple, they're so unconscious to the reality that it's because you're sick. You've been trained to hate your own and to look for a savior other than yourself. And it's just a whole sick mentality.
I wonder, and again, I'm not making any type of accusations or anything. So let me preface my next statement with that. I wonder if there is a power and an economic dynamic at play here. That
Well, it has to be. It has to be, man.
I mean, I don't want to make an unfounded assertion, but you have you work with what you have. And as soon as someone who is better comes along, you step to the side and let that person who's more qualified take the driver's seat. You know what I mean? But that doesn't seem to be what's going on. It seems to be like, hey, we holding this down, and unless you on the team, it's a wrap for you.
So that's what I'm saying. So, may Allah help us, man. But like I said, I don't know if you want to try to do this again next week or you want to do it every other week, being as though we had a couple of weeks off. What you want to do? I would like to do it.
Yeah, we did have a couple weeks off. Let me hit you during the week. Let's keep in
You hit me
touch
during the week.
because I got some
Hit me
things. I
during the
got
week.
some things, and I don't know if you field questions or take suggestions from the people who log in, but I don't want them to feel like we're not paying them any attention because
Yeah.
we
Well,
so
I'm gonna say this.
go ahead.
Anybody on here right now before we click off can give any suggestions on what would you like for us to talk about next. Anything in the community that you think is happening that should be addressed. Inshallah ta'ala, as far as socially and its effect on us as Muslims, dealing with the what we've been talking about and in these videos. Bring it up, write it down, and I'll look at it and I'll write the suggestions down and I will pass them off to the brother. And inshallah ta'ala, also he'll be looking at the suggestions too. And then we can take it from there. And then inshallah ta'ala, we can try to, like that. Because Rashid Abdurrahman Savage, I know he has some suggestions. We got to get ready for his suggestions.
Ain't nobody paying him no attention, man.
Ain't nobody paying him no
Ain't
mind.
nobody paying that dude no
He be
attention, man.
He be starting trouble, bro. He be starting a lot of trouble,
Yeah, I
man.
know, man. Old
You know what I'm saying?
internet thug.
Yeah, he be starting a lot of trouble, man. I got to call him Brother Malcolm.
Brother Malcolm.
He Brother Malcolm.
Oh,
man.
boy.
You know what I mean?
That guy.
So, inshallah, I'll get with you during the week, inshallah ta'ala.
All right, sounds good.
All right, inshallah. All right, salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam.